Welcome back to another edition of the Course Creation Incubator Podcast. I'm your host, Gina Onativia, here to get you stoked about your course creation and your marketing and help you build up the course-based business of your dreams. Now, before we dive in, did you listen to last week? Did you apply one of those course learning trends that we talked about? Which one did you do? How did you take action? And if you haven't listened already, please go back. I'll link to it in the show notes because I want to make sure you're on trend in terms of what you're providing for your course creation. And by the way, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss one episode. And if you want to get coached by me, I mentioned this in the last episode as well, there's a link in the show notes to apply to be on a future episode of the Course Creation Incubator. Today, I want to talk all about call to actions, especially when it comes to your free content. Because let's be honest, guys, many of you are putting out some incredible free content, but not reaping the rewards and the benefits on the back end. Because you're not doing call to actions, your call to actions are not strong enough, maybe you're not mixing it up. So today, I want to talk about 3 ways that you can deliver really great content and strong call to actions along the way. Because as a course creator, as a reminder, you're putting out that content in order to eventually sell, depending on what stage your business is in and what's appropriate for where you are. And if you're revving up to sell, say in the next few months, I definitely want to make sure you have some call to actions in your content. So, and trust me, guys, I was as guilty as anyone of not putting either enough call to actions or being too soft about asking for something, about asking for the next step. Even on this podcast, if you go back to the early episodes, I was kind of shy. Yes, even me. I was shy about saying, hey, check this out, or take this next step with me, or buy this, enroll. And now that I've grown with confidence, this is the 151st episode, so it's been a little bit, I've promoted more. I've put my call to actions out there. At the beginning of this episode, I said, make sure you're subscribed. Okay, I want you to take action on that. I asked you about being on a future coaching episode. That's another call to action. It's totally free. Just because it's a CTA doesn't mean that your person has to buy something. It's just the next step that you want them to take action on that eventually will nurture them to the sale. I do want you to generate revenue. I do want you to have an actual business that makes money. So eventually you're going to nurture them to the sale, to the enrollment. So your call to actions can mean all kinds of things. And that's what we're going to talk about today. To make sure, if nothing else, that you embed call to actions and the next step in your content. Now, there are few reasons why these call to actions are so important. First and foremost, people are busy. And giving them a call to action is making it easier for them to take that next step with you. They don't have to think about it. They don't have to do any additional research. You're giving them that extra value and support that's saying, okay, here's where to go next. Secondly, I'd encourage you to plan your call to action with your customer journeys in mind. And I'll link in the show notes to the customer journey podcast that I've done in the past. So for example, most people won't see a social media post and buy your program immediately. So what's their next step? Invite them to sign up for your free gift. Get them on your email list so you can nurture that relationship. A lot of times, sometimes, we're focused on the big goal. We get them to buy, but there are a lot of steps and wins along the way. There's a lot of touches, right? Intentionally planning your CTA supports your ideal clients and plans a more sustainable business. So the first thing I want you to think about is your nurtures, aka your emails that you're putting out weekly, every other week, once a month, whatever it is, you're putting it out on a consistent basis. So there should be a strong call to action to check out your content first and foremost, right? Because the idea of a nurture is that you're adding value, you're giving tips. So you might have that added value embedded in your email directly. Some of you are doing long form emails where it becomes kind of like your newsletter. That's great. So whatever it looks like, whether you're sending them to a video, you're sending them to a podcast, we'll talk about podcasts in a minute, or a blog, for example, you have a call to action inside of that email. And I want you to remember how important the PS is, right? We all read the PS at the end of an email. Like, what's that little thing that our eye just catches on before we quit out of an email? The PS is your friend. So think about how you're using it. And if you're part of my community, and if you're not, by the way, make sure you join, you'll get my emails mentioning the podcast is out. And I always try to use that PS wisely. So it could go to the 12-month plan that helps you figure out your content and your course creation month by month. By the way, download that now if you haven't done that. I'll link to it in the show notes. I also mention my coaching calls in the PS, or I can mention my different courses, either my online course Jumpstart or my 6-week accelerator, depending again on what the season is for me. I've had a client, so here's another example of how you can effectively use your PS and emails. I've had a client who has an event coming up in about 5 or 6 months. And we used to market closer to the event, like 3 or 4 months out. But we've announced the dates. We announced the dates a year in advance. Let's not be quiet or subtle about marketing this bad boy. So we've of late really been pushing it in the PS, adding value in the email, in the nurture email, tremendous value, great content. But then in the PS, reminding them that this event is coming up. And it's been effective. It's been great to remind them, hey, you want to get in now because the price is going to go up. So we have some early bird pricing on it. So we've got some urgency right there. And then maybe eventually we'll talk about how the seats are going to fill up, because they are going to fill up and there'll be that scarcity. So it's a great way to use the PS as a reminder and not be afraid, right? Because we've already added value to their lives. And then we're just saying like, hey, if this speaks to you, if this content is where you're at and where you want to go, well, then the next step is to naturally attend this event. It's a no-brainer, right? It's going back to that customer path. If they've downloaded the guide, they've learned more inside of that email, the next step is naturally the event. So if you have a nurture sequence, I hope you do, you can use this to promote an offer that you always want to fill. So for example, we have clients who use the PS in every nurture sequence email to promote their free workshop, which then sells into a high ticket program. Then there's another client who's the PS in her nurture sequence to invite her people to book a discovery call for her one-to-one coaching. Always reminding people what you have, right? It never hurts because again, you've loved on them. And then you're saying, PS, if you're interested, here you go. The second content piece I want to talk about is podcasts. Now, if you're familiar with podcasts, and many of you are, because especially if you're listening to this one, you have an opportunity to promote and give a call to action at the beginning, in the middle, mid-roll, and then at the end. And there's other opportunities as well. That's pretty standard though. And these are a great place to give call to actions. And like I mentioned earlier, I've become more aggressive in terms of a call to action. And you guys have listened to podcasts where they hit you up front really hard, right? Like they hit you with the sale of their course up front and they're not shy about it. They're like, hey, if you like listening to this program, you're going to love this program. That's a direct sale at the beginning of the podcast. So there's 3 opportunities at least, but you can mix and match. And you can make the most of Apple Music and the different players with your blurb and making sure there's a call to action there. And with this episode, I just want you to be more conscious of where you're embedding your actions that you want your students to take. So I'm definitely figuring out my own style with this podcast and how I like to embed my call to actions, but you can play with it in terms of what you have in your audio, what you have in your show notes, what you have in the different blurbs that show up in the players of where people listen to your podcast. And a great show to listen to is that Regina Martin episode that I did a couple of episodes ago, where she talks about how to get stronger call to actions on your pages. So, and make sure your buy buttons stand out. So that's a great one to listen to. I'll link to that in the show notes. Now with podcasts, remember that your listeners might be listening weeks, months, or even years from now. So you got to keep evergreen in mind. You might mention a special event or offer coming up, but make sure to also promote offers that will be around in the future, such as your lead magnet or a paid offer. Think about how each episode in CTA can support your business for a long time to come. That's the great thing about podcasts. And then your last content delivery would be blogs or written content. And long form blogs or written content still do great. You still get traffic, you get all that great SEO from it. We have a client right now who's resuscitating her blog. We're testing out driving a kind of a teaser nurture to her blog to see what kind of traffic we can get. And we're going to test out a wait list to her course, registering for a paid workshop, all kinds of fun call to actions. So I want you to be intentional in terms of what happens when you post that content, because someone's getting value from you, someone's learning something for you, and they want to know what the next step is, just like your podcast, just like the email nurtures, right? So I've been talking about how to write a book with Tristan, my son, and I've been reading a lot of blogs about how to write kids' books. And I'm thirsty for an opt-in, for a lead magnet that's going to help my knowledge. If somebody at the end of the blog about books hits me up with a $197 starter course about how to write kidlit, I'm sold, because I'm a captivated audience. I'm on your blog. I've downloaded your opt-in. I'm ready for the next step. I want to get this done. So that's what we got to think in terms of written content, in terms of all our content. All right, before I let you go, let's talk about some best practices around blogs. Number one, using pop-ups. Yes, I know some of us have strong feelings about pop-ups, but the honest thing is they work. So I do want you to try them out. You can put a timer on them so they're not coming up right away and they're not super annoying. Or you could put boundaries on it. So if it's only an exit pop, so when someone tries to leave your page, then it comes up. Secondly, you might want to include a button or a call to action at the top of your blog post to capture your person's attention right away. We've been testing this out with different client emails. Third, you can link helpful resources related to your post within the blog, videos, podcast episodes, lead magnets, etc. Fourth, you can also include a CTA at the end of each blog post, giving readers an easy next step. And then the fifth thing I want you to keep in mind is if you include links to your sales page, have the page redirect to your waitlist page when you're not currently open for enrollment. That way your links always work and you don't have to worry about losing potential leads. So hopefully I'm going to see some awesome CTAs in your content, and this was a helpful episode to you. All right, so here are my final call to actions for you guys. One, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a workshop episode, or I've got some really awesome guests coming up. You're not going to want to miss them. Two, if this podcast has left an impact on you, please leave me a review. I love seeing your comments. And three, if you're interested in getting coached by me, sign up, apply for a future coaching podcast. Until next time, go create, be you and be brilliant, and get it done.